Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namasami. So tonight I thought I would talk about the second path factor in the Noble Eightfold Path. Last time I was here I spoke about the first path factor, which is right view or right understanding, sammaditthi. So I'm going to speak about samma sankappo, which is usually translated as right intention, and sometimes translated as right thought. I've seen right resolve, and one translation I saw was right purpose. And I looked up in the Polytext Society dictionary, I looked up sankappo, and I found right thought, right intention, and right purpose. So it's intention of our mind, our thoughts, and maybe eventually purpose, depending on if we think and ponder about these things for a while. It may be a purpose, or we may be bringing up the thoughts in order to cultivate a purpose. But the idea in the path for right intention is it's one of the wisdom factors, and it springs from right view. It's described in the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses, as springing. All the path factors spring from the preceding one, so it springs from right view. And in the Great 40, it's described that right view comes first, and for right intention, the one understands what is right intention and what is wrong intention. You see wrong intention as wrong intention, and right intention as right intention. So this is the discernment that is made by right view to just to discern right from wrong as far as the intention is concerned. So in the standard translation for where it's how it's standardly described, right intention is described as nekkhamma sankappo, which is the intention for renunciation. And the second aspect of it is abhyapada sankappo, which is non-ill will, and ahimsa sankappo, which is non-cruelty. So these three aspects are the standard. And nekkhamma can be described as freedom from sensual desire. It's the opposite. In the suttas, it's described as the opposite from sensual desire. So nekkhamma, or renunciation, begins with the mind, and so thoughts of renunciation or intention for renunciation. And how would that manifest in our lives depends on what precepts we're keeping, in part. But when we're sitting on the cushion, certainly thoughts of sensual desire would be obstructing our meditation. So we can abandon the thought of sensual desire, and this would be a form of renunciation. This would be nekkhamma. So it all starts with the mind. If we're obsessing with something of the senses, some desire for something of the senses, then we might go out and pursue it. This will be our purpose. So if we wish not to engage in some kind of activity, then this nekama comes in handy. We would abandon the thought of that particular desire for that particular object. So this is how nekama can help anyone in any walk of life. So we discern what's helpful and what's harmful. Use our discernment to help us with this right intention. And then thoughts of ill will. We don't want to cultivate thoughts of ill will. Certainly these are obstructions to meditation, and they can cause harm in our lives if we act on them through speech or through body. You can see it's easy for us to understand how this is harmful. And thoughts of cruelty also is similar to ill will. We may act in cruel ways if we're cultivating ill will, but if we're harboring thoughts of cruelty, we may act on that. So this is why the Buddha often brings up what's called the negative aspect of things first. If we think about what was harmful first, if it's arising in our mind, then we abandon these thoughts in order to cultivate the opposite, help us cultivate the opposite. Or we may be thinking thoughts of renunciation or thoughts of non-ill will, which could be metta or loving kindness or goodwill. So we can cultivate these opposites, the right intention, in order to overcome the wrong intention. I had been thinking about, I had been asked to speak at Common Ground, and so I had been thinking, they had asked me to speak about renunciation, because that was something that's a little bit different. I'm a little different from the people at Common Ground Meditation Center, because it's a lay community. So this one sutta came to my mind. It's called Dveda Vitaka Sutta. It's in the middle length discourses, and the English translation is two kinds of thought. And as I was saying, Sankapo sometimes is translated as thought. Vitaka is also thought, but I saw in the Pali English dictionary that they're also equivalent, Sankappa and Vitaka. As in some cases they're equivalent. So it's interesting. This sutta talks about how the Buddha, before his awakening, decided that he would divide his thoughts into two classes. So I'll read some from this and talk a little bit about it as I go along, how it relates to Samma Sankappo, or right intention. Well, he states, Bhikkhus, before my enlightenment, while I was still an unenlightened bodhisatta, it occurred to me, suppose that I divide my thoughts into two classes. Then I sat on one side, thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, thoughts of cruelty, and I sat on the other side, thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-ill will, and thoughts of non-cruelty. So you see, this is just what has been described as wrong intention. The one side is sensual desire, ill will, and cruelty, and on the other side is the samma sankappo, the right intention, thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-ill will, and thoughts of non-cruelty. And I didn't look at the Pali to see, but I'm guessing when it says thoughts of, it may be vitaka. I don't know. I'll have to look at that some other time, but I didn't have time this time to really consider that. So he says, as I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of sensual desire arose in me, and I understood thus, this thought of sensual desire has arisen in me. This leads to my own affliction, to the affliction of others, and to the affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana. When I considered this leads to my own affliction, it subsided in me. When I considered this leads to others' affliction, it subsided in me. When I considered this leads to the affliction of both, it subsided in me. When I considered this obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana, it subsided in me. Whenever a thought of sensual desire arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. So here he is, he's before his awakening, and I don't know how long it was before his awakening that he was doing this practice, but this is so beautiful because he's describing his process of mind, what he did. You could look at it as a form of meditation that he was doing, just really considering what was arising in his mind and considering how it impacted himself and how it impacted other people. So, causing harm to oneself because these kind of thoughts obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana. So we can contemplate that. If the thought of sensual desire is obstructing these things, we should abandon it. So these thoughts subsided just from him looking at them. He didn't have to force them away, but they subsided on their own because he was really seeing the danger in them. As I abided thus diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of ill will arose in me, a thought of cruelty arose in me. And then he considered these the same way as sensual desire. And so he was able to let go or abandon these thoughts just by considering how they could cause harm to himself or others or both, and how they obstruct wisdom and cause difficulties and lead away from Nibbana. So he goes on to say, Bhikkhus, whatever a bhikkhu frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. Well, if anyone, we can just say that, anyone frequently thinks and ponders upon something, that'll become the inclination of their mind. If they frequently think and ponder upon thoughts of sensual desire, they have abandoned the thought of renunciation to cultivate the thought of sensual desire. Then the mind inclines to thoughts of sensual desire. If he frequently thinks upon and ponders upon thoughts of ill will, upon thoughts of cruelty, he has abandoned the thought of non-cruelty to cultivate the thought of cruelty. And then his mind inclines to thoughts of cruelty. So we can observe in ourselves how our mind is inclining on what we think and ponder about, and is this helpful or is this harmful? So he continues Just as in the last month of the rainy season in autumn, when the crops thicken, a cowherd would guard his cows by constantly tapping and poking them on the side, and that with a stick to check and curb them. Why is that? Because he sees that he could be flogged, imprisoned, fined, or blamed if he let them stray into the crops. So too I saw in unwholesome states danger, degradation, and defilement, and in wholesome states the blessing of renunciation, the aspect of cleansing. So at this point he's observing what's arising, and he's having to, he's a little bit proactive here with his thoughts in this description. As I abided thus diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of renunciation arose in me. I understood this. A thought of renunciation has arisen in me. This does not lead to my own affliction or to others, or the affliction of both. It aids in wisdom and does not cause difficulties, and leads to nibbana. If I think and ponder upon this thought, even for a day and night, even for a night and day, I see nothing to fear from it. But with excessive thinking and pondering, I might tire my body, and when my body is tired, the mind becomes strained, and when the mind becomes strained, it is far from concentration. So I steadied my mind internally, quieted it, and brought it to singleness, and concentrated it. Why is that? So that my mind should not be strained. So he's saying that if he's thinking, it's excessive thinking and pondering upon these thoughts, of the wholesome thoughts. So even the wholesome thoughts in this sutta, he's saying, can cause a little difficulty in meditation. The mind becomes strained. As I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of non-ill will arose in me, a thought of non-cruelty arose in me. I understood thus, this thought of non-cruelty has arisen in me. This does not lead to my own affliction or to the affliction of others, or to both. It aids in wisdom, does not cause difficulties, and leads to nibbana. If I think and ponder upon this thought, even for day and night, even for a night and day, I see nothing to fear from it, but excessive thinking and pondering might tire my body. Just read that. Bhikkhus, whatever a bhikkhu frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of renunciation, he has abandoned the thought of sensual desire to cultivate the thought of renunciation, and then his mind inclines to thoughts of renunciation. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of non-ill will, upon thoughts of non-cruelty, he has abandoned the thought of cruelty to cultivate the thought of non-cruelty. Then his mind inclines to the thoughts of non-cruelty. Just as in the last month of the hot season, when the crops have been brought inside the village, a cowherd would guard his cows while staying at the root of a tree or out in the open, since he needs only to be mindful that those cows are there. So too, there was need for me only to be mindful of that those states were there. So this is, instead of really bringing the thoughts up and pondering them, the thoughts of non-cruelty, the thoughts of renunciation, the thoughts of non-ill will would be coming up naturally, and he's abandoned the thoughts of the unwholesome mental states. So he's not needing to do much checking of his mind. He's just aware of what's arising in his mind instead of this discerning process and abandoning. So at this point, he says, tireless energy was aroused in me, and unremitting mindfulness was established. My body was tranquil and untroubled, my mind concentrated and unified, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states. I entered and abided in the first jhana. So here he's secluded from the sensual desire. He's already abandoned that. His mind is peaceful, and he's secluded from unwholesome states, so the energy is able to come up naturally, and he's able to enter in the first jhana. And then in this sutta, he goes through all 4 jhanas, and then he understands the 3 knowledges. The knowledge of his past lives, the knowledge of how beings arise and pass according to their actions, and then the knowledge of the destruction of the taints. So this seems to me like he's going through this whole progression of really the discernment of right intention. He's abandoning wrong intention, and he's cultivating right intention, which helps with this. It's just like the whole process unfolding somewhat naturally, but through effort also, by really examining his mind. And then he's able to come to full awakening. So right view also plays a part, because there's that discernment with what's wholesome and what's unwholesome. And also right effort and right mindfulness. And this is also something, these all work together. The whole path works together in support of awakening. So I just thought this is really, the sutta is very much related to right intention, because it does describe how the Buddha really came to working with right intention as one of the aspects that helped him to his full awakening. So the Noble Eightfold Path is it's a very integrated path, and right intention, as I was saying, is the second factor in the Noble Eightfold Path, and it springs from right view, and these 2 are the wisdom factors. And this is the work we have to do. This sutta is very encouraging to me, because it shows the Buddha before his awakening, he's still struggling with unwholesome mental states. And this shows how he worked with them, overcame them. So I always get more out of the sutta every time I contemplate it. This is something that I like to think and ponder about, this sutta. And just how it relates to right intention. So I offer this for your reflection.